welcome everybody. My name is Karen McGuire, and I'm here on behalf of the Local Employment and Economic Development Program here at the OECD. We're all about trying to bring ministries to main streets, and I think today's event, looking at retail and main streets, really is very much in line with the spirit of what we try to do here in the Local Employment and Economic Development Program at the OECD. So today's discussion is from mom and pops to pop-ups, local development and the future of retail. It's in the context of our work here, 40 years at the OECD of looking at how to ensure vibrant communities through integrated approaches to local economic development. And today's discussion is in line with some of the discussions we've been having most recently, for example, in Cork, Ireland, where we celebrated the 40th anniversary and talked a lot about whether all of these trends with respect to commerce, consumption patterns, living patterns, etc., environmental imperatives, whether it's going to be more of the same or a change in the game. And so we have really an esteemed set of panelists to look at local development and the future of retail with us today from around the world. So we welcome all of you here. Just a little housekeeping. So please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat function. It's great to hear where everybody's coming from and get that dynamic going in these virtual settings. Second, if you have questions as our panelists are starting to give information, don't hesitate to put in the question and answer buttons, and we'll get to those later on in the session. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the floor for introductory remarks. Ambassador Jack Markell from the United States to the OECD, we're really honored to have you join us here today and look forward to hearing some opening words as somebody who's very well versed in trying to support main streets. Thank you.
Well, Karen, thank you very much. Really appreciate the invitation. Good to be with everybody. This is a very timely topic, and I also think this sort of shows off the OECD at its very best when we find opportunities for people in the 38 member countries to learn from each other and from the subject matter experts at the OECD itself. It's really, for me, the most exciting thing about being at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the idea that we can learn best practices from folks at the OECD and from your peers around the world, which is what this is all about. This is a topic that is actually very near and dear to me. I served for 8 years as the governor of Delaware. And there was no question in my mind, as it was, I think, probably for all the governors, we understand how important it is that our main streets be vibrant so that people get off the highways, not that the highways are unimportant, but that they visit main streets as well and support our local communities. When I was governor, actually supported an initiative over just a few years. We created a dozen downtown development districts and essentially unlocked $500 million of private sector money that was leveraged by really, frankly, a small amount of public sector funding. And it was just sort of one example. We actually took that, we learned from an example in Virginia, and we applied it to the context in Delaware. That was great, still is great. But that being said, we know how impactful COVID has been. And, to see the drop off in foot traffic in so many of our communities, to see the difficulty that so many of our retailers have had, even though there's been a nice bounce back, foot traffic is still not what it was before COVID. So this particular opportunity to learn creative best practices from your peers around the world, I think, is really very, very valuable. From the UK, there's the Build Back Better High Streets program that coordinates, as we all should, the private, the public sector, community partners when it comes to vacant buildings and the like. Main Street America, which is an initiative and an organization that I worked very closely with when I was governor, has done fantastic work all across the country. And one in particular that I've found interesting is the one, Kendall, Whittier, which is a part of a town in the United States that frankly has been able to turn some long-term blight into what's now a lively hub for arts and culture. Dublin, Amsterdam have examples as well. You're going to hear from a Canadian bakery, which has a great story to tell. There are just so many wonderful examples around the world of our peers who are doing some creative work. And for me, representing the US, when folks in the US, state and local policymakers, foundations, and others get the benefit of the experiences and the creativity of our peers around the world. That's to our benefit, just as our opportunity to share our best practices with them should be helpful as well. So I'm a huge fan of this kind of effort at the OECD. Really appreciate everybody joining in. Appreciate the panelists for sharing their best practices, and I hope this is really successful for all involved. But thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Markell, for joining us and for highlighting some of these trends that are really having an impact on our main streets and retail, and some of the things we can do about it. And I think you mentioned a lot about creativity, and I think culture and creativity is a common theme we're seeing as people are looking at how to rethink a bit some of their main streets and the way that people interact, and how to use these spaces and these vacant buildings in new ways, and get that private investment to also ensure greater inclusion and vitality across different types of communities. So thank you so much, Ambassador Markell, for those introductory remarks. I'm going to now turn to Jeff Finkel, who is working with the OECD as an international expert on economic development for many decades. So we're very pleased to have Jeff moderate this session, and he's going to introduce our international set of panelists. And again, just a reminder, don't hesitate to list if you have any questions as people are speaking in the chat. And again, as this is being recorded, we also will encourage you to share afterwards on social media, so that all of your friends and colleagues who couldn't join in at this time slot are able to benefit from today's discussion. So I'm going to pass it on to Jeff Finkel. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Karen. And I do want to reiterate what Karen just said. If you know, we're going to have close to 100, or maybe hopefully a little bit more than that, but this is going to be taped and or recorded, and feel free to share that with any of your friends. It may take a few days for it to appear on our the OECD website. But we would be thrilled if you shared it with others. We have a fabulous group of experts with us today. And so I've communicated with almost all of them, recruited some of them, and they represent a good cross-section of what some of the best practices in dealing with urban, rural, central city, small town, neighborhood revitalization. We also have a retailer here who has been successful throughout the pandemic. So without listening to me rattle on, I'm going to turn to Richard Guiney, who runs the downtown development efforts in Dublin, Ireland. He's going to introduce himself and then make some opening remarks for our set of panelists. Richard?
Thank you, Jeff, and I'm delighted to be here. I think this is a really good conversation to have. So as Jeff said, my name is Richard Guiney. I'm the CEO of Dublin Town, which is the business improvement district in Dublin city centre, Dublin, Ireland. I have previously served on the board of the Association of Town City Management in London, and I'm currently on the board of the Global Business Districts Innovation Club, which has members from across the world, and we're looking at, you know, the future of town centres and how we develop our downtowns, etc. And you know, obviously the conversation today I think is very relevant to that. So I have put together some slides, and I'll just quickly go through those. So I think, look, I think the 2020s were going to be a time of enormous change and radical change. Whether we'd had COVID or not, there was going to be change. I think what COVID has done is accelerated the pace of the innovations and the changes that were going to take place anyway. But you know, I think the root causes things like digital innovation, and also the need to adapt to climate change. We're going to change how we live, where we live, the jobs that we're going to have, and all of those things were obviously going to feed into consumer patterns, how we spent our money, what we spent our money on, and indeed where we were going to spend our money on. And I suppose if you think about it as well, the digital innovation that's taken place over the last number of years facilitated us during the pandemic. We were able to retreat into this virtual world and still engage commercially. Now, whether we want to stay in that virtual world or we want to get back into the real world, I suppose is a topic that we'll be exploring in this conversation, and indeed in many conversations over the next couple of years. But what COVID really did for me, it showed that we can change radically, we can change rapidly, and in unison right across the world very quickly. We changed how we lived in response to a challenge. And I think, you know, obviously as climate change becomes more real, as we see the impacts, and particularly as we get close to the point of no return, I think we will find that we have to adapt our lives quite radically. And we've done that before, so this will not be new to us. And I think if you take retailers, successful retailers have always understood consumer behavior. They've always adapted to consumer behavior, and they've really understood those consumers. And I think that will certainly stand to them. And you've seen it in terms of you know, how innovative retailers can be. But I also think the locations in which retail is found, so particularly city centres, will also have to adapt very quickly and in a very dramatic way, you know, over the next couple of years. And that may be more difficult, I think, for some of our local authorities to do. So I think, you know, look, there's been a lot of talk, you know, that the real world retail will lose out completely to online. I think that's perhaps overstated. There was evidence in 2019 in the United States that the online retail sales were starting to perhaps plateau and moderate. Obviously, there was an explosion during the pandemic, but again, you know, that's coming back to some extent. So I think, you know, the case that people will not engage with stores is probably overstated. However, I think the experience as well is that not all retail is performing equally. So what we're seeing is the high-end retail is recovering quite well. Value end of the market is also recovering quite well. But we do have a squeezed middle, and you know, we have lost a number of those middle range stores, those ubiquitous stores that were in the malls and on the high streets, and they are leaving gaps within our town centres and indeed in our malls. And I think that shows just, you know, a change in the nature of retail. And I think, you know, going back to what I was saying in terms of innovation, I think what we're going to see is professionalization, particularly at the high end of retail, where, you know, the store assistants will be able to give a better, you know, service and guide people in their purchases. And I think this in-store experience is going to improve. I think, you know, we need to be more engaging in our retail. And we need to give people a reason to get off the sofa. You can buy whatever you want at any time of the day or night with your mobile phone. So we have to give people a reason to actually make that effort. And again, just in Dublin, before the pandemic, we noticed a change in how people were using the cities. So, for example, we had more people dining in Dublin than shopping. This social aspect, and something that was kind of coming up, you know, on the edge, was that people were actually just using the city as a place to meet. They were coming in and they were meeting their friends. They may not engage commercially with the city, but they were using the city as a destination point. And I think, again, we've seen that post-pandemic, that's a trend that is actually increasing. So I think, you know, while people are in the city, they will spend, and we know from research that, you know, if they're here to go to the theatre or engage with cultural activities, they do spend. So that gives us an opportunity to, I think, to reach out to people. And I think we need to make it easier for people to spend in our retail environment. So there's talk of, you know, shared deliveries, and we have a scheme in Dublin, shared deliveries, last mile delivery, where smaller units will cooperate on deliveries, reducing the number of vehicles that have to come into the city, improving the air quality, and obviously our emissions. But I think we have to look at things like shared deliveries out, so that we can make it easier for people who are coming in for various different purposes to engage with retail, so they don't have to worry about carrying bags to the restaurant afterwards or when they're meeting their friends. But also that we encourage the use of sustainable transport, so that people can come in on their bicycle, because we know far more people, twice as many people come in on a bicycle to go to an office than to go to a shop, for example. But make it easier to make that choice for sustainable transport that bit easier. And I think, you know, look, we also need to consider that not only the in-store experience, but the outdoor experience as well needs to improve. And I think this is where we need the engagement of city authorities. So I think we will see things like more parklets, where people can do that thing of meeting their friends. I think we'll see more greening that has many positive impacts. Not only does it brighten the place up and make it a prettier place to be and a nicer place to be, but also we've got the carbon capture, and indeed, you know, we know that rainfall has increased with global warming. It will increase a lot further. So we need to make sure that we're not overloading our drainage system and causing flooding, etc. So, you know, there's a symbiotic relationship in all of that. And I think that stretches to the need to encourage our workers back to the city, our office workers back to the city. So in Dublin, we're getting pretty close to where we were pre-pandemic at the weekends, but certainly not midweek. So we do need, in terms of for our retailers and our restaurants, to encourage people back into the city. But it's also the feedback from the office managers that they want their staff back. They want them back for productivity purposes. They want them for team building. They want them particularly for training graduates and new recruits. All of those things, you know, require face-to-face. And I firmly believe that, you know, we've been through a pandemic, we've had a virus, but we're still fundamentally humans, and our synergy and how we cooperate with each other and the different skills that we bring together are core to how we proceed. So I think, looking forward, I think, you know, we need our city authorities working with the entire business community, the office, the hospitality, the retail, to devise plans that take into account policy decisions to deal with things like climate change, but also take into account the need to maintain vibrancy and vitality in the trading sectors, so that we do have better cities for all. And I'm really looking forward to engaging with everybody on the discussion going forward. Thank you.
Richard, that was spectacular. Thank you for kicking us off. Hannah Wright, who is with the High Street program in the UK, is our next speaker. I'm somewhat thrilled that you know, Hannah has a little bit of the past that I have, and that she came out of, if economic development is different than High Street or downtown development, I'm not sure it is, but we share that affinity for economic development. Hannah, if you can unmute and join us, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, everyone. I think, oh, perfect. Okay, so I'll just introduce myself. I'm one of the board members for the UK government's High Street Task Force, and I specialise on sustainability and economic development. Just to give you a very quick snapshot of the task force, it was set up by the UK government about 3 years ago for a 5-year placement, and it's an alliance of placemaking experts that are sort of working to redefine the high street. Commissioned back in 2019, we provide guidance, tools, skills to help the communities, partnerships and local authorities and governments to transform their high street. Next slide, please. Perfect. So we have an alliance of different organisations which we work very closely with. We have 4 professional bodies that includes the Institute of Place Management. We have sector bodies like the ACTM, which I think is similar in the US to the Downtown Association. We have data providers like for footfall and organisations that help us with social media. And then we also work with PwC for sort of the underlying capability of sort of analysing our data. Please, could we go to the next slide? Perfect. So just to give a very quick snapshot of what the High Street Task Force supports, we focus on 4 areas. We help with boosting local authority capacity to plan and enact change on the high streets. We look at building sustainable placemaking skills. We take a common approach, so we coordinate at a national level, which is backed by research. And we also make sure that we share the data to help them make right decisions. To give you some short snaps on that, we've engaged with around 84 local authorities to date, 14 of which were pilots, 70 were selected based on the Institute for Place Management and Retail Exposure metrics. Of that 84 local authorities, 61 of them are at the point where we've really started to be able to generate some data analysis. I've drawn just a couple of examples from that. Some of the key strengths that we found from placemaking is benefiting from good accessibility, and many local areas have substantial development plans which will have a big positive impact on the high street. And they're very much focused on their retail and non-retail offers. However, as with strengths, there's always some weaknesses. I think the main one that the UK local authorities are struggling with is sort of visioning and a strategy development. And a lot of the local stakeholders are unsure about what their local vision is. And we're working with them to sort of identify a good key challenge, a vision that will help them look at their high streets in a different way. One of which is place activation. Thank you. We visited multiple sites and found around 25% of them had a high street activation, which is things like markets, festivals, for generating footfall into the town. The downside is that 61% didn't have a plan. And so, the issue of the high street and generating footfall is definitely something that needs to be focused on in the UK. 11% we weren't even able to identify any level of activity at all. So it is a concern in terms of long-term redevelopment, particularly as we come out of COVID, as we do need to bring people, and new infrastructure needs to be addressed. And we will have a number of different ideas. I'm going to share, next slide, please. Oh, that was the stats for the high street activation. The next slide, please. So I'm just going to share one example of where we've tried to sort of bring the online shopping in a virtual into bricks and mortar. So we have a retail case study that I launched in Southwold, which is a local coastal town in Suffolk, where we were really struggling to get footfall into the high street. And so what we did was we worked with about 6 different retailers of differing products sales. So for example, here you'll see there's a gallery. We work with clothing, and we created a little QR code where you could literally turn the shop front into a virtual store. So as people are walking past the high street, whether it's because they're dining and they're going out, they could buy literally what was in the window. Next slide, please. Perfect. So what we tried to do there is we just had a very simple e-commerce platform where each shop, that pays a significant amount of money to have a bricks and mortar space there in the high street, we enabled them to promote their window shops. And as people walked past, of which during COVID and out of COVID, a lot of people were encouraged to walk up and down the high streets if they lived there. And it helped generate additional revenue when the shops were closed. So like, for example, in the evenings, a lot of the local independent stores will close at around 5 o'clock, whereas the restaurants stay open. And so it was a great way for retailers to be able to maximize selling their products that they had in the shop within 3 clicks. And so it was an idea that was really initially born out of social distancing. But it's taken off, and a number of the stores, when they started posting about it, as you will see, because it helped engage with their social media, recorded that it was some of the highest customer engagement levels that they'd received because of the initiative, which was great. In terms of sort of moving out of a post-COVID and looking at the high streets, I think I reiterate, sort of concur with pretty much everything that Richard has said in his previous presentation. So I will leave it here. But I just wanted to give a short case study as an example of initiatives and innovative ideas that businesses and independent businesses are looking to do.
Anna, thank you very much. I know some people are starting to put some questions in. what we're going to do is, and any of our speakers, if you want to go into the chat and provide a written response, please by all feel free to do so. But we're going to deal with the questions after the presentations are all finished. The next speaker, I think you can tell from his shirt, he and the color behind him, he is full of enthusiasm. And Pino Dioya is a retailer. And Pino, I didn't remember. Do you sell elephant ears, funnel cakes? Oh, it's beaver tails. And
that hurts, Jeff.
If you go to an American county fair, you can find elephant ears or funnel cakes. But frankly, I don't know where I would find one except in the summer at a fair. In your case, you can find beaver tails at 200 different locations. I'm going to turn it over to you to let you introduce yourself and talk about retailing and your perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. So my name is Pino Dioya, and I like to consider myself a happy individual and a colorful individual, and that's easy to do when you sell a fun product like the one that I'm very fortunate to be at the helm of with Beaver Tails. As Jeff indicated, 200 stores, 197 mostly across Canada, about a dozen in the States. So there are select places where you can enjoy our product in the US. And we have been unwittingly blessed during COVID to have had tremendous success. Other than the amusement parks, which were forcibly closed, we saw same-store sales increases. We saw pivots that were very successful with some of our food trucks. We have a number of food trucks. And we saw great sales increases just in terms of new store openings. So just briefly, I'll try and keep my presentation short. We've been around since 1978, so this slide's a bit old. We're slightly over that. We are Canada's happy place. We've been called Canada's iconic dessert, and we proudly share that President Obama had a beaver tail during both of his visits to Canada. We are, and actually Prince Charles, I should mention, just had a beaver tails during his visit to Canada recently as well. So we really are Canada's dessert, and this came about somewhat serendipitously, but it happened because we are located in beautiful places like this one that you see artistically displayed. I'm on a delay. There you go. But we are also located in similarly festive places like Mont Tremblant in the bottom right, which is a big ski resort, or the Rideau skating rink in Ottawa, which is the world's largest outdoor skating rink, appropriately in Canada, or in the bottom left, right in downtown Toronto on the waterfront. We've always been drawn to unique places like this. It's been our environment for the last 40 plus years. And it's made our product somewhat special. This iconic photograph is repeated dozens of times a day on social media without us really prompting it. But when you have the beautiful Rockies behind our two Banff stores, it kind of makes for an easy photograph. I guess the CN Tower in the top left does too. So, and sorry, I would be remiss not to mention one of our most popular stores in the bottom left on South Park. We even made it to Cartoon Land. My kids particularly like that store. What has helped us as a retailer make it through COVID, again, serendipitously, we were lucky to be in the right places as everyone fled the traditional malls and high streets. They went out to lesser high streets and to communities, vacation towns, vacation villages, resort towns, places where one would go to have an experience. And I think experience was one of the key words in placemaking Hannah just mentioned previously. So it's some of the buzz that happened as a result of COVID. I'll tell you something else that is not spoken about as much, but which humbly has helped us a lot. Diets have died during COVID. People have decided that they are living life, which has been wonderful for our product. Not that really, truly, our product is not that fattening, but I'm not going to purport to make it a health food either. So people escaped life in the cities and went somewhere where they could have an experience, which was both perhaps food-based and or experience-based. And here's a couple of examples I wanted to share from people I know who are doing it well locally and a little bit further away. Toronto Yorkdale Mall, which is a high-end mall in our largest city in Canada, very high-end mall. And as Richard aptly pointed out, high-end has done fairly well coming back post-COVID, but yet the malls still don't have the traffic that they would have had. So they have something called a Friends experience based on a TV show where you can go and kind of reenact some of the scenes. And if perhaps you have younger people in the family, you could go and do not far away from Square One or from Yorkdale, maybe an hour away in another suburb of Toronto, the World of Barbie, where your child can go and actually live or play in a Barbie experience. In Montreal, we're more of a foodie culture, so a lot of our new retail spaces are being designed around markets, which is saying something because markets or outdoors in Montreal can get to -30 or -40 Celsius with wind chill in the winter. So there needs to be a little bit of thinking, but getting that foodie in as part of the experience permits an excuse to go into more traditional retail. And then some of you may have heard about this. This is a much bigger scale, but Area 15 in Las Vegas is what they term a wonderland of art, music, and amusement. And they do essentially what I call Cirque Du Soleil, which Cirque is a local Canadian brand, which is all about the circus experience. They do it on a retail level. And I think most of you would probably be more familiar with some of these guys. Go Hide Seek, which does really an Instagram experience. You're basically going there to be able to take Instagram photos, and they will take over vacant retail spaces in malls and or high streets for rent, often done in a public-private partnership, but they will drive significant traffic to that area of the street or mall. And then my own favorite is out of the US, I believe Oregon. I apologize to my American friends if I'm getting that wrong. But Meow Wolf was an artist collective that essentially, I think, started a lot of this movement. And they've devised what can only be termed as amusement parks for the mind. It's really an immersive Cirque du Soleil. Vast experiences that take over former Walmarts or bowling alleys. This is anything but the commoditization of product. I can't imagine in my lifetime that this will be available via Amazon delivery anytime soon. This experience draws you in, and usually you will make the day of it. And it's not just for children. In fact, some of the experiences are decidedly more adult. You'll get together with 5-10 friends and really make a day of it. So in short, we're seeing the places we've traditionally benefited from, its experience, its entertainment, its leisure. There's an additional layer that's being thrown on to not just retail, but that experience and that mind immersive content. Where we are still having a problem in Canada, and Canada was one of the most lockdown jurisdictions in the world. So we really did have it tough throughout the country, especially in Montreal or in my province, Quebec, where we're still seeing a lag, and it's my last slide, is the office space. I personally worry as an entrepreneur, as a person who believes in corporate culture and brand culture enormously. I worry that the hybrid model is not just bad for the high street because we have 40 stories of vacant offices or mostly vacant offices. I worry what it's going to do to our businesses as well. And I think that those countries, those cities, and those businesses that are able to keep the culture and encourage people to come in, and I don't know if that's 40 hours a week or 2 days a week, but to use the space, I think, Jeff, you mentioned as a collaborative brainstorm space, that is important to corporate culture. And the minute we go full hybrid, whether you're at home in a suburb an hour away or at the other side of the planet, the lines start to get blurred. And I don't know what that does for the vibrancy of the 40 stories above and not just the high street. So ending on a little bit of a low note, that's my fear factor for all of this, but hopefully the rest of it gave better ideas.
Fabulous.
I did the shirt justice, Jeff, yes?
Oh, well, we're going to be coming back to you here in a minute. I'm not a speaker today, but I am going to throw my 2 cents in every now and then. I'm worried, I know the US tax system better than I know other countries. Property tax is a big deal. As these buildings have empty spaces, their tax valuation is going to go down. That's going to hurt city budgets. And in addition, the ability for some of these building owners to actually pay their mortgages is also at jeopardy. So unless we're able to get people back or find new purposes for these downtown buildings, I think we do have an uphill battle ahead of us. So I share your concern. Thank you. We're next going to turn it over to Cindy Allison. And I must say, Ambassador Markell was influential in this program today because he kind of encouraged us to look at the Main Street program. And Sydney represents a Main Street who was an award winner for the Kendall Whittier Main Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so we looked for one of those winners, and Kendall Whittier made a lot of sense for this session today. Sydney, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the Kendall Whittier Main Street program and how you're addressing some of these issues?
Yeah, so thank you for the introduction. I am from Tulsa, Oklahoma. For those who are unfamiliar, Oklahoma is pretty much in the center of the United States, and Tulsa is in the northeastern corner. I grew up here. I've lived here my whole life. I started working for Kendall Whittier Main Street last year after I graduated. I graduated from college during the pandemic in 2020, and I started working for Main Street last year. And today I'm going to talk about kind of like a before, during, and after COVID in terms of our organization, a little bit of the history of Kendall Whittier, what we were able to do during COVID to support small businesses in the area, and what we are doing now. Maybe a little bit of plans for the future as well. So should I go ahead and get started? All right. So Kendall Whittier was Tulsa's first suburban shopping district in Tulsa. It started in 1909 well, it kind of like was established in 1909, but didn't get kicked off the ground until the 20s. Hopefully everybody knows about the iconic Route 66 that runs through the entire length of the United States. It was on the original alignment. It was a super thriving district in the 30s and 40s. But then in the 1960s, they built a highway right in the middle of our district, which cut it in half. And that sent Kendall Whittier into a free fall. And Kendall Whittier was considered Tulsa's red light district. There were a lot of adult-oriented businesses, adult bookstores, gentlemen's clubs, things like that, that made the area kind of sketchy. And it wasn't until Kendall Whittier Main Street entered the scene in 2010 that things really started to turn around and people started to see the potential of Kendall Whittier. So we are a nonprofit. We were named we were given the Great American Main Street Award in 2020 and Oklahoma Program of the Year, which is, to me, kind of like the Oscars of Main Street revitalization. So that was a really, really cool moment for us. And our mission, I just put our mission on there, is to promote and restore Kendall Whittier as a thriving, walkable, and welcoming community for living and working. And we were able to transform this district with the 4-point approach, which was coined by Main Street America. I should say that Kendall Whittier Main Street is a part of a bigger network of Main Streets in Tulsa, which is a part of a network of Main Streets in Oklahoma, which is a part of a bigger network of Main Streets nationally. So that award that we won was national. Like there are thousands of Main Streets in the United States, and we won that award, which I think is really cool. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the 4-point approach and things that we've done that have helped us succeed as an organization under each of those categories. So the 4 points are organization, economic vitality, design, and promotion. Under organization, we have fundraising and friend raising. Fundraising is, of course, money, sponsorships, donations, charitable contributions. Friend raising is volunteers, committee, and board members. We rely on volunteers for almost everything we do. They are truly the backbone of our organization. And then we have economic vitality, which is business recruitment and business retention. Although we don't have control over what businesses want to be in Kendall Whittier, we do work with business and property owners to find the right fit. And we are always talking about progress without marginalization, which means that we try to keep our businesses accessible and affordable while also bringing people to the district to continue to support those businesses. None of the businesses in Kendall Whittier have to pay to get any of these services. All the services that we offer are free. We offer one-on-one assistance with businesses and kind of act as a guide to best practices. Some of the businesses in Kendall Whittier are very well established and have been around for decades, and they might not need those services, but we are always there to support businesses who need maybe a little extra help. And in 2020, of course, a big pandemic happened, and lots of businesses had to temporarily close, and we provided a rent relief program to help those business and property owners pay for rent when they weren't getting any business from customers. And we also had to come up with a lot of creative ways for businesses to stay open, for them to stay relevant during COVID, since nobody was out shopping in person. And so we came up with a lot of interesting things, like there's a science shop in Kendall Whittier that I like to use as an example. They sell like microscopes and fossils and like really cool things like that. And so we encourage them to do some like online virtual science courses for kids. That way they stay relevant, they stay at the front of everybody's minds, and then people will go online and say, oh, I'm gonna buy my kid this really cool telescope. So there's we had to come up with a lot of creative things to do on social media to promote the businesses without actually encouraging people to get out in person. And we are happy to say that no businesses in Kendall Whittier are permanently closed due to COVID, which is something that not a lot of communities can say. So we are very proud of that. The next point is design. And that is anything that keeps Kendall Whittier clean and beautiful. So we've installed bike racks in the district, street lights, planters, murals. We have a facade grant program where we give them, it's basically a matching grant that we give to businesses to help them update the facade of their buildings while also keeping historic preservation in mind. Because like I said, Kendall Whittier is over 100 years old, and so are our buildings and sidewalks and things like that. So we are always trying to keep everything updated, but while keeping the historical integrity of these buildings. All businesses in Kendall Whittier get free architectural and interior design services from an architect firm that is here in Kendall Whittier. And we also host cleanup efforts every once in a while throughout the year to pick up trash, clean up graffiti, just everything we can to keep the neighborhood looking presentable and clean and beautiful. And then finally, we have promotion. That's the final point. We host around 10-ish events annually that bring people to the district. And the goal of those events is to encourage people to come back on their own to support the small businesses. All of our events have pretty much the same formula. There's always music, food, and shopping of some kind, which everybody likes. Aside from our typical social media marketing, we do social media contests to encourage people to shop at businesses, and then they might win a prize if they visit so many businesses. So we do giveaways. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out to around 1,000 people right now. And we have great relationships with our local media. We have merchandise. I'm wearing a Kendall Whittier t-shirt right now. We have lots of really great merchandise that we like to sell and give away at events. And we, alongside events, last year, we doubled our staff by hiring me. We went from a staff of 1 to a staff of 2. And because of that, we were able to do more things besides our normal events. We hosted 3 vaccine clinics, COVID vaccine clinics last year. We helped over 300 people get vaccinated for COVID in the area, which I'm so proud of. And we started doing school supply drives for local schools in Kendall, Whittier as well, so that we can, we have businesses participate as drop-off locations, and people come to their business. They support a local business and they donate school supplies, and we get to support students and businesses at the same time, which I think is great, and maybe something that we wouldn't have been able to do without hiring more help. So that is an overview of the 4 points. And before I move on, I just wanted to throw some numbers at you guys to give a sense of the impact that we've had as an organization since 2010. First of all, the occupancy rate in Kendall, Whittier is 100%. There are no empty buildings. There are some buildings that are in between businesses right now, but we have a line of people that want to move into Kendall, Whittier to start their business here. Over $160 million has been reinvested back into the community since 2010. 83 new businesses have opened. Over 400 jobs have been created. We've given out over 52 of those facade grants that I talked about earlier. We've accumulated over 17,000 volunteer hours and over $375,000 in volunteer value, all since 2010. And so that's one of everything that I talked about is the reason why I think we got that GAMSA award back in 2020 is our commitment to really supporting small businesses in any way we can, and especially during such a challenging year. And it's continued to be challenging. COVID's not over yet. And so there are still challenges that we are facing every day. But one thing about Kendall, Whittier is that everybody who lives and works here is really proud of the community, and we're willing to do anything to keep it thriving.
Sydney, that's we're gonna move on to CJ if we can. That was
that's great. That's a good stopping point.
Great presentation, and I'm going to turn over to CJ Dipple, who's with the Amsterdam, and he has some great guidance for us in terms of what they're doing to support their downtown. CJ, do you mind taking it?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for the introduction and for the invitation to this webinar. First, I'd like to apologize for any on forehand for any incorrect English or not being able to find the right words when, for example, you, Jeff, asked me an unexpected question. That being said, I can now reveal my personal details. My name is CJ Dipple. I am a policy advisor to the mayor and alderman of the city of Amsterdam in the field of retail, spacious retail. And in the preparation of this for this webinar, I was presented with some topics, for example, how to get people returning to their offices, how to get people returning to the shops instead of having goods delivered at home, and how to compete with online retailers. Well, as part of my introduction, I'd like to respond to these questions with a premise. And the premise is that for a local government, like the city of Amsterdam, these questions are not appropriate. Of course, they are for a brick and mortar retailer and for a real estate owner because they have to pay rent and receive rent. But for a local government, the task is to monitor these developments like remote working, remote shopping, and then adapt the built environment to it or not, come up with rules or support local entrepreneurs as much as possible to cope with these challenges, and not the other way around. I will leave it at this because I was only granted a meager 6 minutes for my introduction, so Thank you.
CJ, we're going to have to get some more questions your way to because you gave us some time back right there. So the next speaker that we're going to have is Norma Ramirez Demise. Norma, I want to make it well known that Mary Means is a good friend of mine. And Mary is credited with starting the Main Street program. And so I feel wonderful to see her legacy lives on. But Norma, you were going to take what we've just heard and maybe come up with a short retort and maybe ask a couple of the speakers some questions. So please introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Hello, everybody. And it's a privilege to be among friends of Main Streets across the world. And we are Main Street America. I'm the Vice President of Revitalization Services for a network of over 1,800 members. We know that more than 2,000 communities across the country and the US have been implementing Main Street at their own level, some of them starting, some of them growing the vitality of their districts, some of them working to sustain them. We're very proud of our network. It is a collaborative model that we have where we know as a national organization, we are not able to impact every community. So our network does that. So we work with partners across state, counties, and citywide programs. And also just the example that you've learned today with Kendall Whittier. Kendall Whittier as a district receives the support and works with the city of Tulsa, but also is a part and receives the resources that Oklahoma Main Street provides under the Department of Commerce. So you can see that Main Street is a collaborative model where the governments at the local, state, or county-wide level can come together and work with the private sector to help our businesses. So I'm very appreciative of the remarks that everybody has made and the opportunities to say, at the end of the day, who we serve is the retailer, the business owners that are in our districts. And the opportunity for organizations and governments to work together, not to regulate, but to go beyond regulating, to actually being the advocate for good business, local and scale development is an important part of what Main Street is all about. So many of the panelists talk about, and I really appreciated to hear the concept of need for adaptation, for need to change. Change is a constant, we say often in Main Street. It happens. The question is if we manage it so that it can happen the way we want it, or if we just let it happen to us. And what you've shown is that your organizations and efforts across the world are really making sure that change happens strategically. So with that in mind, I would like to go back to the panelists and invite you to consider a little bit more thought and comments about the concept of adaptation. Throughout COVID, we have seen the need not only for businesses to look beyond having the door open for customers to come in, and for our districts, not only to expect promotions or events and activities for people to come in to our districts, but to be able to take our districts and our businesses to people's homes and to where they are and they work. So with that in mind, I'm hoping that you can all highlight, and I'm going to start with CJ, just to give us an example or two on what you see has been a good practice for adaptation that you can highlight, and how other organizations that are working with retailers across the world can really consider working with and collaborating and building a model that really helps the businesses adapt and pivot their models as well.
Well, sorry. like what I said, the government, local government has to monitor developments and then support local entrepreneurs with their business. What the city of Amsterdam does is supporting, stimulating collaboration. So, for example, setting up a business improvement district like in Dublin, get retailers and real estate owners work together and think about the profile of their district or street or area. What are they there for? What customers do they need to attract? And adapt their marketing strategies to it. Also, sorry? Oh,
Excellent.
yeah. Because like I said, we city people want this. People needed to work at home because of COVID, but remote shopping is something people want. Remote shopping has been there for 10 or 15 years or so, and people have adapted this way of shopping. So that's something, yeah, you can disagree or agree, but people don't stop shopping at home. So what we did in Amsterdam is allow retailers to have a part of their shop devoted to a little cafe or restaurant. So you can not only buy a book, for example, in a bookstore, but also have a cup of coffee and talk about your book or talk about something else. Because dining, it's been said before, is something people like to do and people like to meet, and people are willing to get off the sofa and go to an area like this. But on the other hand, Amsterdam is perhaps a little atypical city because it's not that big, at least the city center isn't. And before COVID and now also when COVID is away for a while, a lot of tourists visit the city, and especially in the city center, we are coping with too many visitors. That's perhaps the other way around compared to Tulsa, where you are willing to, or where your ambition is to attract people. In the city of Amsterdam, we are doing. We're thinking about how to get less people because it gets too crowded, and for people who live in the city of Amsterdam, it's sometimes becoming very unpleasant because there's rumor, there's noise, business 24 hours a day. So that's another problem. So we try to attract people to visit the Amsterdam metropolitan area, or visit the suburbs of Amsterdam, where I live in, and that's to spread the number of visitors across the region instead of having them all in the city center. So like I said,
that's an excellent problem to have.
Yeah. It seems like a luxurious problem, but it's also a difficult problem because you cannot forbid people to visit your city.
Oh, if it is a destination, especially, right?
Yes.
So thank you.
Okay.
You highlight something important as far as the role of government to provide support, incentives, and resources, and the opportunities for organizations like Kendall, Whittier, or High Streets to look at how those resources can be supporting directly the businesses. So I would like to invite the panel to consider the opportunities to say, what do you see when Karen talked about the future of retail? What would be some of the key opportunities you see in the future, and how organizations can address them? Invite Hannah, if you want to be the first one, and welcome the others.
Hi. I would say, I'd say there's a lot of opportunity. It's difficult because in the UK, we have what we call villages, and then towns, and then cities. And I guess it's the same in every country, but You know, for example, some of the coastal towns, they're very reliant on tourists. And so every single town has to have something different. So for example, you know, Amsterdam, they were looking at CJ was talking about having the little coffee shops inside the retail stores. Whereas over here, some of the local authorities are actually looking to reduce the amount of hospitality because there's just too much on the high street and there's not enough variety. And so, you know, for example, you've got the coastal towns that rely on the tourists. And so they want to offer things like that. But a lot of the UK, it's very quintessentially English and historical. And so, you know, they still want those quaint little villages, quaint little streets that have opportunities. So I was just reading the notes, whether it was representative of what I was just saying. I don't know if anybody would want to expand on the fact that there needs to be diversity away from hospitality. I represent on the sustainability side of thing, and certainly, you know, one of the key things is looking at our waste, and having more hospitality and more food consumption just goes in completely the wrong direction if we're trying to tackle climate change.
It's in Main Street, we encourage our communities to identify their local identities, you know, what is the unique market position that they have, and of course, create those unique destinations that bring people to the districts. But you are talking about a balancing act, and that is an important piece of our work. It cannot be just bringing people to visit or to enjoy events and activities, but what we call the Main Street promotional retail is important, which is what Pinot offers, the opportunity to build destinations based on products and services. So that will be an opportunity to say, okay, so we're talking about balance on one hand, but our businesses want more customers as well. And so, Pinot, what would you say are some key thoughts and recommendations?
Well, maybe mixing in a few of the topics that you discussed. And Hannah, on the sustainability front, you're absolutely right. And businesses like mine are constantly trying to deal with compostable packaging and reducing the carbon footprint on transport. That's probably our biggest evil with the broader fast food industry. That said, because I think that's just a journey we're all on together. I can tell you some of the things that have happened here, which mix even some of CJ's comments. In Canada, we lost a lot of our festivals, and summertime in Canada is very short, unforgivably short. And so usually you have all your big festivals in the summer. And of course, courtesy COVID, those were gone. And we have a fleet of about 40 or 50 food trucks and food trailers that had to pivot. And what we ended up doing was, again, just kind of melding. I just thought of this as pertinent to a few of the comments made. We ended up pivoting and parking those vehicles in smaller plazas, usually with a grocery store, so that the one activity that was still going on during COVID was grocery shopping. Now mom could maybe bring the kids and the husband, and maybe dad goes in to get the groceries while mom enjoys a beaver tail outside in what was a parking lot, but has now become like a festival fairground. We cutely called it bringing the fun and the magic to you. But what was really going on was getting people out of the home and creating an opportunity where the cities, so CJ, to your monitoring comment, the municipalities we were dealing with don't often have the ability, or did not have the ability, to permit us to do that. And that changed. So if we just have that level of cooperation where those opportunities now are seen as opportunities, yes, maybe we also bring some competition to existing hospitality, and in cities fortunate enough to be overburdened with tourists or with pedestrians, that could be an issue. But if done right, we could target maybe secondary areas that are not as busy and create happenings where they did not happen.
Norma, I want to get some of the questions that we've gotten from the audience on the table here.
Yeah, Jeff, one of them is about safety.
Yes, that was the first one. Do you want to go ahead and address Thomas's question, and maybe Richard could jump in and our friend from Tulsa talk about safety?
Thank you. Yes, it will be great. I would say it's an opportunity, perhaps, Richard, to comment on Dublin's effort. Safety in Main Street is, just wanted to give a heads up. In Main Street, we talk about places that people feel welcomed and safe. And of course, COVID was one of those where guidelines had to be followed. So here, looking towards the future is the opportunity to say, how can we then continue to build the perception as well as the reality of safety?
Yeah, look, I think, Norma, what you said there in terms of perception is very valid. Dublin would have a very low level of crime. It's a safe city by international standards, but we do get feedback that people don't feel as safe as they should. And that will impact on their decision to visit the city. And I think, those hygiene factors, the cleanliness, the safety, the perception of safety, is this a place you want to bring your kids? All of those things are really important. And ultimately it comes down to being relevant to the needs and wants of the local community and indeed visitors. And if CJ wants to send some tourists to Dublin, we'd be more than happy to welcome them here. But it's about, being relevant, and it's about having that overall experience. And as I was saying, it's great to have an in-store experience, but you need an outdoor experience as well. And I think when we're going to have more people socializing in our cities and wanting to meet, and perhaps using our cities our cities and towns in a pre-industrial revolution mode where they're socializing, they're transacting business and engaging in retail. I think, that those welcoming factors that you've said are of absolute vital importance, along with having a unique and engaging offering. And I think what we're seeing as well and for ourselves is that people are seeking out those unique experiences and those unique retailers. And I think they do give a personality to a district, and that's something that we absolutely need to encourage.
Thank you so much, Richard. And what about Sydney? Can you highlight some of the efforts for safety and in Kendall, Whittier?
So last year, I started at Kendall, Whittier Main Street in March of 2020, which is kind of when people were first starting to get vaccinated. The staff getting vaccinated was one of our biggest priorities, so that we could actually feel more comfortable going out and helping people in the neighborhood. But like I mentioned in my presentation earlier, we hosted 3 COVID vaccine clinics here in Kendall, Whittier. And one thing that I didn't mention before was that Kendall, Whittier has a very large Hispanic population. It makes up about 40% of the total population of the neighborhood. And what we learned is that there is a lot of mistrust and misconceptions about COVID and vaccines that spread in the Hispanic community. And so one thing that we wanted to do was of course, we are very pro-vaccine at the organization, and we wanted to make sure that people had factual information that they knew getting vaccinated for COVID was safe. And not only would it protect them, but it would protect people in their community, churches, schools, things like that. So we hosted those 3 clinics at a Catholic church that serves Hispanic families that is right down the street from our office. And we had no idea what the turnout would be like, but we ended up vaccinating over 100 people at each of these clinics. So over 300 people received their COVID vaccines. And I would say like 95% of the people that came only spoke Spanish. And so we had some volunteers from another nonprofit here in Kendall, Whittier offer bilingual support to the people that came in to get their vaccines. We printed all of the consent forms in Spanish as well. So we made sure that no matter who came in, everybody would feel included and safe. And then we also made sure that everybody walked out with a vaccine, because we know that there not a lot of people like in the Kendall Whittier area have social security numbers or IDs or other documents that people who are born in the US just have just by being born here. And so we made sure that no matter what, people walked out with a vaccine. That way they could feel safe living and working in the
Thank you.
neighborhood. Yeah.
You're expanding that sense of safety to other levels. And Hannah perhaps can also tackle to the question that came going from safety to sustainability, especially when we think of big cities and in particular, but that sense of safety with the challenge of homeless and what goes related to that. Perhaps you can expand.
Well, certainly I wanted to just talk in terms of sustainability and safety. I think one of the key things is on the social aspects, because a lot of people consider sustainability as an environmental issue, and it's not, it's a social issue as well. A lot of, like you touched on, the homelessness comes down to the social injustices that happen. And a lot of it is around, you know, geographically where they live within the towns, looking at things like transport. I mean, predominantly it's women, and you know, key minority groups that are usually at the front and brunt of any sort of sustainable issue. You know, they don't have the same bounce back facilities, as it were, and the same financial support that a lot of the more affluent areas do. And so in terms of, you know, looking at areas like, for example, you get a lot more leafy green sustainable areas in towns where the affluent live rather than the homelessness. And in terms of looking at where you could change some of the infrastructure, so for example, things like looking at areas where you could readdress the shelters. So you have, for example, a lot of the local councils are focusing on the homeless shelters and getting those as sustainable as possible, both through retrofitting, you know, looking at their energy consumptions, and are dealing with that first because it's seen as a social aspect, almost like the ESG, and it covers that first. I'm just touching on the homelessness because you sort of brought that up.
So before you go, Hannah, Philip Kemp, who hopefully is still up in Western Australia, it's 11:44 there. He said, do the shop owners pay to be a part of the digital high street? I don't think we answered that for Philip. Can you tell us what you're charging for that service?
It was a literally the shop owners just sign up, so they can sign up to the company. It was a local company based near Southwold, where they generate little QR codes, and the businesses would just contact them, set up a little account. I think it was around, I don't know in Australian dollars, but it was about £35. And they could generate their own QR codes, and then they would stick them on the windows. So as people walk past, they just use, because in the UK we have the track and trace, or we had the track and trace, I should say. So everybody, you know, from your grandparents down to the really young, were very used to using QR codes. So that's how we generated the digital shop. And so, you know, the shop owners would set it up themselves independently. And it worked very well with shops that didn't have an online presence, because a lot of local independents in the UK still don't have websites. It's shifted more now because of COVID, because they realized they had to get an online presence. But it was another way of us supporting businesses to embrace the digital age, I guess. But it was just they can do it. I can send the information, but they set it up themselves. And yeah, it's literally 3 clicks. It's just a little platform that comes up, and then you click on the item you want that you can see in the shop window.
Yeah. So Karen, you responded to Marvin's thoughts about the whole notion of tax generation, office buildings versus apartment buildings in our downtowns. Do you want to you maybe repeat that for folks, how you responded? And then after Karen responds, I'm going to have everybody kind of give us some final thoughts, and then we'll have Anna Rubin close this out in a few minutes. Karen?
Okay, well, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, no, I just responded that, of course, the nature of local taxation is going to vary from country to country. And so the specific impacts of transitioning some of those office buildings to housing and the nature of the revenues that would generate, particularly for local levels, would vary. So I suggested that if you wanted more information, we have an observatory on subnational government finance and investment that can give a little bit of a sense of how these things are organized across governments. But of course, a lot of our work is looking at how to address the housing crisis in a lot of our big cities. And of course, creating more opportunities for housing, especially when people are struggling to kind of pay the rent and keep up with other areas of inflation. It's something that's very important to think about in our work on urban development. And I just flagged because Hannah just mentioned also some really nice links between SMEs that are retailers, and then the link to online. And just to flag that we have colleagues here, we'll put in the chat, that are looking at through this Digital for SME program, how to really take advantage of these different opportunities that COVID has raised in order to support the growth of opportunities for certain forms of SMEs. So just want to flag that as well, picking up on Hannah's comments.
Thank you, Karen. CJ, I'm going to let you, since we didn't get as much commentary, I wanted you to start in terms of your summation or your final thoughts on what we should be doing as communities and to support retail.
Well, like I said, it is very difficult because for retailers, the main purpose is to get revenues. And whether that be in a brick and mortar environment or 100% via the internet, they will do whatever is the cheapest and what customers want. So it might be that in a year or 10 or 15, all physical retailers have disappeared because they moved to the internet. And there are some people who say, well, it's better to redevelop the vacant retail spaces that are now in main streets, etc., to housing, because there's a lot of demand for affordable housing. But once it's changed into residential real estate, it's almost impossible to reverse to a commercial usage. So yeah, it's very difficult to say residential real estate will have priority in everything, or support retailers that are still in our streets to survive as long as possible. I don't have the answer to it, but we have the luxury, as to say, that many people come to Amsterdam because they want to visit historic and monumental architecture. And when people have seen the museums, etc., they want to do something else, and they go to a restaurant or they shop. You don't go to Amsterdam to shop online, because then you can better stay at home. So to that end, there will be a physical demand for some years, I think, and a sort of need for retailers to stay in those shopping streets, because there are a lot of people, pedestrians passing by. But I don't know how it will be in 15 or 20 years or so. For example, because flying will be difficult because of COVID being there in 10 years time still.
Thank you, CJ. Pino, I'm going to go with you next. If you can give us a short snip, that would be
Sure.
awesome.
So one thing I didn't mention is we sell this delicious pastry, but we often relate to our new staff that while we serve a pastry, we actually sell joy. And I know it sounds cliche, but we really do believe that. And those of you who have tried to be retail hopefully agree. And in that, I'm going to relate to something Sydney said about the experiment, the science shop doing online experiments. That is a form of emotion. It may not be joy, it's maybe education or inspiration, but if we can all relate to emotion, I think emotions is where our species is going as we hurdle through this galaxy. And maybe that'll guide us to come up with more meaningful local solutions. What's the emotion that we want to portray?
Great. I think Karen and Anna have to be real concerned if I go shopping today. I'm going to get those glasses and that shirt and show up to work in that outfit. I'm just blown away. Thank you very much, Pino. You've been great to have with us. Sydney, you want to give us a short clip?
Sure. So I am the daughter of a longtime small business owner. So I know the importance of the community supporting you. And one thing that I learned from that experience and from being a part of Kendall Whittier Main Street and attending conferences and things like that is that when you make an effort to be a part of the community supports you in return. So that's one thing that we always try to do is just to maintain, like you said, that emotion, that human connection, making sure that people know that there are real humans behind the efforts that we put into to support businesses and revitalize the neighborhood. And so I think that's really important. And this experience has been a really cool one. It's very cool to see how people from all over the world are supporting their communities. And so this is really valuable to me.
Richard, thank you, Sydney.
Yeah, look, there's been talk about residential use within our town centres, and I think we're going to see more residential use. But I think it's important that we get the balance right, and that was mentioned before, so that we don't suck out the vibrancy and the vitality of our cities, because our cities require that, and indeed our city authorities require the tax that comes from that vitality. So I think there's a role for the business community now more than ever in terms of working with the regulatory bodies in terms of planning laws and how we plan our cities, so that we have, for example, commercial engagement at ground floor, etc. And indeed, look, it was one of the suggestions in terms of office returning offices to residential use. That hasn't been always successful. Again, having the businesses within districts adds to the lunchtime trade for restaurants, for example. It adds to the evening time activity. So it's not a simple solution, and that's where I think the role of the business community, right across all the sectors of the business community, working with local authorities, is really essential. And the final point I make is that one of the things that COVID showed us is that we are absolutely a social creature. And when that's taken away from us, there are mental health issues. So I think our cities are bustling with people and opportunities for engagement. And I think the future of retail, in terms of real life retail, is about that human contact and that engagement. And I don't think we can ever lose sight of the fact that, humans respond to other humans. And I think that's the future of retail and our town centres. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Hannah.
Well, I would finish with my sustainability hat on, in that I think no matter what we look to do in the future, it has to sustain, everything has to be within a sustainable framework. You can't move forward now. I have this sort of prosperity doesn't need to have growth. And from an economic perspective, it's all about the GDP, and everything always has to go upwards. And I'm very much high streets and towns and cities can prosper without there needing to be extra, I know this is slightly controversial, but more shops, because I think there needs to be more green spaces. There needs to be more focus shifted onto people's well-being, less cars in the cities, and more, as Richard has said, a lot of them is around experiential events and activities, and a focus away from just buying because you want something, and more because you need it. And then when you need it, you look at it from is this recyclable? Is this something that can, sustain us in the future? It's a finite planet. And I just think, every high street has a responsibility, whether you're a local government, whether you're a business owner, to be considering moving forward that, as and when you are wanting to generate, an extra, opening an extra shop or generating more footfall, it has to come at a price, and you have to balance out what that is.
Thank you, Hannah. Norma, make it real quick if you could. I want to get Anna Rubin to close this out.
I just wanted to thank you, Jeff, for moderating and for the invitation to be part of this effort. I believe in balanced and comprehensive approach. That's the Main Street approach we live and work on and are passionate in Main Street America and our network. So I invite everybody to, I'll just put our website in there in the chat, and welcome interactions and connections. Thank you again for the opportunity to be part of this effort.
Thank you to all of you. Anna, do you want to close this out?
Great. I want to give a warm thanks to Jeff and all of our panelists, as well as Ambassador Markle, for joining us here today. I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and I think it really clearly demonstrates that there's an appetite for this kind of further international exchange and sharing around this topic. So we hope to kind of be a broker for that going forward. We covered a lot of ground today, and so I have the tough job of trying to recap everything in 90 seconds. So I won't do everyone justice, so that's my caveat. But I think there are some key themes, and if you'll indulge me, I'll try and kind of organize them around a number of E's. We tend to like to do that in our wrap-up comments at the OECD, because that's our idea of being fun. So first, the question is, what is going to change? And is it everything is going to change, or just something? So that's the first E, everything with a question mark. And I think it was interesting that there was some disagreement amongst our panelists about kind of what the scale and scope of these changes are going to be. But I think what we all agreed on is, when is it happening, and that this is a cheating E. Accelerate. I couldn't find another E, I apologize. So these changes are happening a lot faster because of COVID, from the kind of rise of e-commerce or kind of the rise of remote working, which was already happening before COVID happened, but definitely accelerated. But I think that everyone agreed around the question of what is the future, and that it's experience, that we really have to think about experience as part of our kind of retail stories now. And then the final E that I had is who is responsible for responding, and that it's really everyone. It's the retailers, property owners, local governments, business improvement districts, or even the volunteers kind of working with Sydney's organization. And then thanks to Pino, I just added one extra E at the end, and that's emotion, because I think that's what kind of underlines a lot of these ideas around community building. So following this event, we'll share some kind of follow-up materials, the recording, as Jeff said, and kind of a short highlights document. And in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out to Jeff or me directly if you're interested in engaging more with the OECD on this topic, or if you have other best practices that you'd like to share with us in future events. In the forum, we're going to be taking a kind of short pause for the summer holidays. We're in Europe, so everything closes down for the month of August, but we have a great slate of webinars lined up for the fall, including on topics like the local impacts of mass layoffs, youth and social entrepreneurship, and the green transition and impacts for local jobs and skills. So I hope you'll kind of join us and be part of our forum family going forward. And we're also hoping to ramp up more in-person events and study tours as COVID allows. So keep your eyes open for announcements about these, and hopefully next time we can be around an actual table and not a virtual table. So in the meantime, we wish you all a great summer holiday, and we hope to see you again in the fall. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you all.